I love video games. One of the things I love about video games is the amazing environments that you get in them these days. So running around a beautiful 3D environment, whether you've got aliens and zombies to kill or not, I love looking at the beauty of the environment, and the amount of artwork that has gone into that, the creativity that has gone into that is phenomenal. And I think there are all sorts of wonderful opportunities for combining artificial intelligence, or at least computing, with creative arts. We're not going to be giving the entire process of music making, or the entire process of writing books, or of creating artworks over to computers just yet. The computers are still just a tool, and we provide the imaginative input, creating the pressure for teachers to work in that one particular direction, getting SATs. And of course SATs are not
they're not creative, really.
They're not creative. So much as teachers, I think it breaks a lot of teachers' hearts, but they spend a huge portion of their time hammering home spelling skills.
Hey yo, it's the LifeShot podcast. Change your world and change the world.
Hi, my name is Clint from LifeShot. I got Antony Wootten, who is a author of children's books, and written many children's books and short stories for adults, and he loves painting, and he's just all into the creative arts, which is a great thing. Antony, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Clint. Really honoured that you've asked me to do this. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have people who are into that creative spirit of life, and I want to speak to you today about the importance of creativity on our young children, because you've been a primary school teacher for many years, right? And you're still involved in education. I wonder if you can give us a glimpse of your career in education, and as well as your step into creative writing, and you mentioned you do painting as well. It would be nice to hear from you how that's gone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I suppose it's a bit of a long story, really, so I'll try not to ramble on too much. But I was a teacher. I trained as a teacher, did a Bachelor of Education. Some people do a subject-specific degree, don't they, and then follow up with a PGC, but I did a teaching degree. And so I started teaching I always have to think really carefully about when this was. I think it was about 1993, so it's going back a bit now. In primary schools, I taught in a number of different primary schools. I started off in Bracknell in Berkshire, and I moved to London after a few years of teaching, and I taught in a number of different schools in London. For a part of that time, I was teaching as an English as an additional language teacher, which was a really, really lovely job to have. I was working in a couple of different schools, which had such a wide mixture of different languages that the children spoke. And very often a large part of my job was sitting with groups of children or working in class alongside the teachers, and I would, have a group of children around me who spoke several different languages and very, very little English. It was really a rewarding job, good fun. I taught for a year in Canada as a class teacher in Saskatchewan, which was a wonderful year of teaching as well. I came back from Canada, went back to my two English as an additional language teaching jobs in London, because that was a teaching exchange. So a Canadian teacher had come over here and done those two jobs in my absence. And eventually, more recently, 10 years ago or so, I moved up to North Yorkshire with my wife, who I met down in London. And we now live up in North Yorkshire, where I'm not teaching anymore. I did teach for a little while when I came up here. Got to be honest, for many years, even though teaching was an incredibly rewarding job in many ways, I'd been desperate to get out of it for a long time. I really wasn't doing what I wanted to do. So the art and the writing were always running along in the background. One of the great things about teaching, of course, is that you get lovely long holidays. So my summer holidays and weekends and so on, an awful lot of that time I used to spend drawing, painting, writing, and I did that for years and years, right from word go, really. I was doing that all the way through my uni years as well, so it's not something that sort of started recently. But It was only in 2011 that I finally got. I self-published my first book, which is called A Tiger Too Many, and it's a book written for Key Stage 2 children. So, well, really, it's written for the 9 to 12 age range. And I was still teaching at that point. And I had a lovely job in a tiny little school, but as I say, teaching was a job that I had been wanting to get out of for a long time. I don't know how familiar you and your listeners might be with all the political wranglings going on in the sort of English teaching community, but the goalposts were ever changing and the pressures were immense, and I didn't enjoy that, so I did eventually find a way to get out of teaching. So I was very lucky to get a job. I still have this job, even though writing and painting is still a large part of my employment. I do still have a 3-day-a-week job, which is what I went into. I went into that full time when I came out of teaching, and my employers have been very kind to me, allowing me to drop days until I've come down to 3 days, so that I can pursue those other interests and activities and really start to move forwards with those.
So what to release that book in 2011? Did that take something of a commitment for you, saying I'm all in now, I'm going to do this, it's going to cost me a bit of money, and I'm taking the plunge, as it were, or it's because it's a risk, right? You're spending money up front to push the book out. How did that feel for you?
It was. So that the history of that particular book is that I actually wrote it in 2005 when I came back from my year teaching in Canada. I came back and thought I'd already written a number of books at that time that I didn't sort of show to anybody. They just existed on the hard drive of my computer. I just love the process of writing, so it's always been recreational for me. And when I came back in 2005, I thought, if I do want to get out of teaching and into writing, I need to write something that perhaps has a bit of a commercial edge to it. So I decided back then to write a book that was going to be the kind of thing that schools would want to use, because I thought if I can get schools interested in my books, I can do author visits into schools, and I can also maybe sell big class sets of books rather than just selling them one at a time, so that teachers can study them with their class and have groups reading them. And so I decided I was going to write for the 9 to 12 age group, which is a great age range to write for, because they are they're switched on enough to be able to, you don't have to hold back on your vocabulary and sentence length and so on. You can write freely like you would do if writing for an adult, and you can also write about quite meaty subject matter.
And their imagination is still quite active, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So, and that's the age group that I was experienced at teaching as well, so I knew the sorts of things they liked. So I decided that I would write this story that was set during World War II, because that was still is a topic that gets studied in primary schools. And I wanted a different angle, because there's quite a lot of World War II fiction for primary school children out there already. So I decided that I would set it in London Zoo. Which is London Zoo in World War II. I wasn't aware of anything else that had that combination at the time. Still not. There are other similar things with other zoos now, I believe. But I thought that seemed like a really interesting way to look at the war, and I had to do a lot of research for that, which was fascinating in itself. And I got that book written, and I wrote that book really quickly. I wrote that. First draft was written quite quickly in sometime in 2005. So that's the sort of backstory. And then I decided I wasn't going to self-publish it myself. I was going to go about publishing it the conventional way. So I set about doing that, trying to get an agent. I sent it off to some agents, and quite quickly I did get an agent for it. It was one of the first agents I sent it off to. You do have to be a bit careful when sending off to agents, because, of course, I don't know, you may or may not know, but there are reputable agents, and there are some agents that will take you on and take money from you and not really do anything with your work. Well, this is one of the reputable agents on the Authors Agents Association, I think it's called.
Yeah.
So this was the real deal. This was a very exciting time for me at that point, because getting an agent, that's the biggest step, really. It's out of your hands then. You hand your book over to an agent. You don't pay them any money. They use their own time and resources to promote that book round to publishers. And she did say to me at the beginning, just because you've got an agent, that doesn't guarantee that it's going to get published. But what it does guarantee is that it's publishable. That an agent who is experienced and reputable has judged that this book is worth investing her time in. That's a great endorsement of what I had done at that time. So that was really pleasing. And unfortunately, it didn't get a publisher. It got some good feedback from publishers it went round to. It nearly got a publisher, but it didn't quite get there. But I realized at that point that that was more to do with it being a lottery than having got to that point. It wasn't an indictment of the book. About a decade went by. I didn't do anything, not a decade, obviously. What was that, 2005? So 6 years went by until I eventually decided to rewrite it. And I thought, well, since my agent, since the agent had said that it was good enough to be published, I'll do it myself. I won't go back into the lottery of trying to get an agent and a publisher the conventional way. So I did that, and that was great. I mean, with my experience in illustrating, I'm also pretty okay with computers, so I was able to do the typesetting and the illustration myself, and really didn't need to employ anybody else to do anything other than get people to read the story for me. A really important part of publishing, obviously. Get it proofread and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I published it myself. It didn't cost me a huge amount of money. All I paid for was the printing costs. So I think at that time it was about £450 for the first batch of 200. Only did 200 copies at the time. But since then, thousands of copies have sold, which is great.
Good stuff. And I've seen some of your ratings on Amazon, even though there's not like hundreds of reviews.
Yeah.
They seem to be quite high up there in the 5 stars. So that's a good badge, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I want to speak to you about creativity, and it's I come from a background of music production and radio. So I started in radio in '98, I think it was, and I did that for many years. And I got into jingle writing, radio adverts, and then into music production. Started my own band. So
All right.
Writing music is, when you got a blank slate, and then you have to create something. It's quite daunting sometimes, because you're like, where do I start? What do I actually put down as the first iteration and the first move? So there's many ways to be creative, and people do it in different ways. But in our education system, is there enough being done at the moment for our young kids to be able to express themselves creatively? What do you think is happening at the moment?
Well, so in the UK system, are you talking about the UK system yourself? Are you knowledgeable about the UK system? I don't know what your
UK system, yeah.
So in the UK system, and I'm still quite sort of tuned in to what's going on there, because my wife is still a teacher, and I'm still visiting schools on a regular basis for both my both sides of my working life. It seems to me, and I think that most teachers would probably agree with me on this, that there has been a great deal of pressure on teachers in recent years and decades, really, to work towards the SATs results, which is what schools are largely judged on. Ofsted, of course, you can't get the highest rating. You can't be rated outstanding as a school if your children's SATs results at the end of year 6 don't reach a certain standard, don't reach a certain level. You have to have a certain percentage of them at a certain level. And then those results go into a league table, published league tables for parents to see. Parents can judge the schools when they're going to send their children there. And of course, schools' money comes from the number of children that they have in the schools. So this whole system has this kind of cyclic effect of creating the pressure for teachers to work in that one particular direction, getting SATs. And of course, SATs are not they're
Not
not
creative, really.
they're not creative. So much as teachers, I think it breaks a lot of teachers' hearts, but they spend a huge portion of their time hammering home spelling skills. We now have to teach spelling, punctuation, and grammar in schools. So the kind of grammar that I wasn't taught but have never needed to know is now being taught in a very formal kind of way in our primary schools. Now, I'm only talking about the primary schools. I can't speak for secondary schools. But that certainly is the case in primary schools. And now, recently, the government, or Ofsted, have said that as well as being judged on those SATs results, schools are now going to, because they've recognised this problem, they've recognised that creativity has fallen by the wayside, a breadth of curriculum, has fallen by the wayside too. They've now said, right, we're going to judge you not just on SAT results, but we're also going to judge you on the breadth of the curriculum that you're offering. So they're not relieving the pressure; they're just adding more pressure to force through this good idea of wanting to celebrate a broader curriculum, but they're not making it easy for teachers. So those are the sorts of reasons why I've come out of it.
Yeah, and there's the pressure of doing something you don't really want, or you don't feel is valuable. Obviously, reading and writing is valuable. We know that. But I was just thinking about artificial intelligence and how it's going to change the future for us as human beings, where it might take away some menial jobs and jobs that don't require us to necessarily be able or have to remember like parrot fashion information, right? And rather, the better thing for us to do is to focus on creativity, building new types of things, coming up with new ideas, making the arts better and doing video production, all that. That's something that, the machines don't have to do for us. We can do that. Whereas, the other types of things like maths and writing and that, I don't know. I don't think it's as important as what the focus has been.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. It's funny looking back through history, and I might be talking out of my backside here, but I think that new technology comes in that looks as if it's going to rob humans of their importance. Think about something as simple as the pocket calculator. Pocket calculators have been in for decades now, and every child in every school will at least have access to one, if not have one themselves, but they still need to learn arithmetic. So, projecting that forward into the future, I think it's easy for us to imagine that artificial intelligence is going to take away our jobs, take away a lot of the. We're not going to need the skills that we have that we've traditionally taught. And I think probably that change will be a lot slower than we expect. I think even whatever happens with artificial intelligence, I think we're still going to need to be able to do those non-creative things that we imagine can be handed over to computers at some point. We're still going to need to be able to do those. But yeah, and I also think there's a great opportunity for those to be blended. One of the nice things that has changed in primary school education in recent years is that teachers have to teach coding, programming.
Okay. Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I was learning programming. When I was about 9, 10, 11, I was learning programming because my dad was a head teacher and he was really interested in computers when they were just coming into schools. So the earliest computers, BBC, and there was another one before that, the Commodore PET, in 16K of memory, I think. And my dad
it's like
brought
one word file now.
Right.
Yeah.
And my dad brought one of those home, and very quickly we were learning how to program for that. And actually, that's a really creative experience. I was programming, writing text adventures, and I was certainly on the BBC anyway, the BBC computer, programming text adventures into it, which was a wonderful experience. Really, that's a real creative experience.
Creative,
yeah. And I think there are all sorts of wonderful opportunities for combining artificial intelligence, or at least computing, with creative arts. Computers are fantastic. When I do my illustration, I don't do a lot of illustration these days, but I have done lots of it over the years, and I've come to do that entirely on the computer. So That's a slightly different issue from the artificial intelligence issue, but actually using computers in these very creative ways, I think, is something that isn't necessarily immediately obvious.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for teachers to find ways of doing that in the classroom.
And that's
I
true,
think.
because music, for example, is another
Oh,
way of,
absolutely, yeah,
because coding, when it comes to music itself, I was obviously not like one of those people who were at this level where I'm super talented. But at the same time, I was very quite mathematical. And when it came to music production, music is very mathematical in a way.
of
So, like you
course,
say,
yeah,
you're mixing that mathematical kind of logical thing with creativity. And that's
yeah,
why I like that mixture. And I think with the coding and coding computer programs, it's a similar thing because you got the logic going on, but it's like, hey, what am I going to make?
yeah,
Again, you
yeah,
got a blank slate. You have to create something, and what's that something going to be?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
So artificial intelligence is one thing, but artificial imagination, that would be another thing. I don't think we're there yet with computers, or that there's anything quite like that on the horizon. We're not going to be giving the entire process of music making, or the entire process of writing books, or of creating
Yeah,
artworks over to computers just yet. The computers are still just a tool, and we
yeah,
provide the imaginative input.
yeah. I'd say that there are some artificial intelligence machines that can make music, but it almost seems that humans want to hear from other humans. We
Yeah,
want to be able to consume from other humans.
yeah, yeah,
And so consuming art, consuming the creative arts is something that I think always hold dear to our hearts as something
yeah.
that we want to receive from somebody else real.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
also, I mean, if a computer is making music, well, someone's programmed it to make that music. I mean, I understand that there are ways in which now computers can learn from what is successful, and
Patterns, yeah.
they can learn their own, recognize patterns, and
Mm.
develop their own musical skills that way, perhaps. But still, that computer, to some great extent, I think at this stage anyway, is still a tool in the hands of a creative. But I love video games. One of the things I love about video games is the amazing environments that you get in them these days. So
Mm.
running around a beautiful 3D environment, whether you've got aliens and zombies to kill or not, I love looking at the beauty of the environment. And the amount of artwork that has gone into that, the creativity that has gone into that is phenomenal. And it's not generally recognized as art, I don't think. You
Mm.
wouldn't see a computer game hanging on the wall of the Tate gallery or whatever, but it's gorgeous artwork. And there are different levels of the creativity there. Somebody has had to create the artwork, and they probably did that by painting pictures. Somebody has had to program the computer to be able to create those 3D worlds as well. They've got to program a computer to simulate the lighting effects that make the scene look beautiful. And that is a creativity as well. They're not creating a finished product. They're creating a program that can create a 3D environment with beautiful lighting and gorgeous sunsets taking place and so on. So there's different
Yeah.
levels of creativity that come in. We think computers are going to replace us as creatives, but actually what's happened there is the computers have created an extra layer of creativity. You've got the
Yeah,
artist, and
that's
you've
right.
got the person creating the program that can
Mm.
make that beauty happen on screen.
It's another output for our creativity. And we must be doing something right worldwide, but as well as in the UK. I'll just think about the company. I lived close to Cambridge, and we've got the science park here, and Cambridge is the hub of, it's kind of like the Silicon Valley of America, so I've heard.
Right,
But there's a lot of science labs here and such, and there's a company called Jagex, and the creativity that comes out of that place is amazing. So something good is also happening with our children as they grow up in
Yeah.
the UK. I mean,
Yeah.
there must be something. What do you think about that?
Well, tell me a little bit about Jagex. I'm interested. What are Jagex doing?
They build those games where you play. You got to build empires. You know,
Right.
when
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you build your army and you build your
Wow.
city.
Wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that we are still producing generations of children who have the creativity that has always been in our children right back through history, and also somewhere along the line they are acquiring the skills to create wonders like the ones that you've just described. I hope that some children will come out of schools. When I go into schools as a visiting author, I don't hide the fact from children that I love playing computer games. I think there's this automatic, from people who don't play computer games, I think there's perhaps an automatic assumption that computer games kill creativity. And I like to make it clear to children when I'm talking to them about being creative and using the imagination. I like to make it clear that the imagination will feed into anything you want to do, whether it's writing books, which is obviously what I'm there to talk to the children about when I visit a school, but equally the imagination is vitally important if you want to be an architect or a video game creator or a scientist or even a politician or just about anything you can think of, a musician, an actor. The imagination is so important, and we are seeing some incredibly creative things coming out of generations that were children when I've been teaching. It's not me taking credit for their creativity, obviously. I'm just saying, I mean, my generation, I'm old enough to have seen these children go through the schooling system with all the things that I perceive as problems with the schooling system that I was talking about earlier on, coming out and still being fantastic creatives, creating things I couldn't even have dreamed about when I was their age. So yeah, as you say, I think we must be nationally, internationally doing something right. Or maybe it's simply that you can't kill imagination. Maybe imagination will survive whatever happens to it. I don't know.
I think that's true. Yeah, the fact that I think we nailed it when we stumbled upon this, the creativity happening in technology. And I think this is just another outlet for our kids, especially because they want to spend time behind that and playing games and escaping to a world. Which actually brings me on to a question about escapism,
right?
And what are healthy mediums of escapism, and where's there's got to be some healthy benefits to escapism, because we need to get away from stuff sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also the other side of maybe that's too much escapism, and people might go into it too much, if you know what I mean.
Well, to me, the ultimate, there kind of can't be too much escapism as long as it's not harming anybody, and as long as it is enabling you to do the things in your life that you want to do. So for me, so writing and painting are the two things that serve as a large part of the bits of my life that I like to escape into. And I'm in the really lucky position of being able to actually make a significant chunk of my income from doing that. So, the ultimate healthy escapism is really whatever it is that you love that you can turn into your job. I think so. And I'm very lucky to have managed to get myself partway into that situation. As I said to you before we started recording, I think the 3-day-a-week job that I have is also something that I absolutely really do enjoy doing as well. So I'm incredibly lucky. But my escapism is painting and writing, and to be able to make my money at doing that, it's not something that has to be relegated to my spare time. So I think that's got to be perhaps the ultimate healthy escapism, not painting and writing, but a thing that you love doing that you can make your living from. But I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want to single out certain forms
things
of escapism. A criminal behavior might be, perhaps not a particularly healthy form of escapism, but if it's not criminal and you enjoy it and doesn't hurt anybody, and you can make some sort of make some sort of money at it, perhaps that's got to be
drugs aside. I mean,
right?
We don't want to talk about that, but not because we don't want to, because
Happy
it's just not. Yeah, but it's not really within our
remit.
Theme for today.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking about kids. They want to play video games.
Yeah.
I struggle a little bit with video games, and I know you're a proponent, but I almost feel like I don't want to get a video game console in my house because kids can become quite addicted to it. And I know that you think, how can my escapism be something that I could potentially make money from? And some kids might say, well, I'll be paid to either create video games or how they get paid just to play the games. So what do you think? Don't be scared to advise me now, because I got 4 kids, right? And two of them are boys. And they're just, my boys are young, so 4 and 2. I was never really into video games a lot. I did play them, but I was never really overly consumed by them, like spent hours and hours every month on month. But is there a benefit to it? Should I consider it?
Okay, so you have flagged up a hole in my previous answer, really. I think there. There's a difference, isn't there, between being a consumer and a producer of entertainment, and of course, being a consumer is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I write my books, I produce my books in the hopes that children are going to sit down and consume them. So, being a consumer of entertainment is a great way to spend your time. I love reading books. I love sitting down and losing myself in a fascinating book. Is it the same for computer games? Well, computer games automatically make us think that they're sort of problematic and that they're numbing children's minds rather than enriching them in some way. And whether or not that's completely true, I don't know. I think I think they are more passive than reading a book. If you're just sitting in front of the television, or if you're just sitting in front of a computer game, there's a passive element to that is perhaps less important with books. Books are physically passive, but you're creating the world in your mind, aren't you? When you're reading a story, you're bringing that world to life in your mind, and your imagination has to step up and do the work. Whereas if you're watching television or playing a video game, your imagination can sit back because they've already done that for you on the screen. So I think that definitely has to be taken into account. I think I'm still somebody who can lose themselves for hours and hours and hours at a time in a video game. I'm very picky and choosy. There's like 2 games, 1 game even now, that I will ever bother to play, but I like them so much that I'm prepared to spend huge amounts of money on an unnecessarily powerful computer, so that I can just do that every once in a while. And I haven't played any games for months and months and months, but there will come a time when I'll start getting withdrawal symptoms and I will lose myself in them for every night a week for a couple of weeks or something like that. So they do have a way of sucking you in, and you're not using your imagination. But there is also a flip side to that. So I'm not answering your question here, really. I'm just sort of debating it myself. Yeah. I hope that's okay. The flip side to it is that the creatives who have put this computer game together have spent a lot of time creating characters, creating beautiful scenes, creating very often incredible, thought-provoking stories. Now, you can play the computer games without engaging with those stories, without noticing the characters. But if you are somebody who does pay attention to those things, then you are having some of the experiences that you would have if you read a book. So perhaps I'm not going to offer you any advice. I don't have kids of my own, so I'm not in a position to preach or advise about this at all, other than I think it's probably worth saying that different children will react differently. When I grew up with computer games, but when I was a child, the games were very different from the games that we see today. I don't know if you remember Elite, which was one of the earliest space simulations. It was one of the first 3D games, but it was wireframe, just white lines on a black background with some white dots whizzing by as stars, but it was a properly 3D environment, and it was magnificent. It was a sort of forerunner of the modern sandbox games, because you could pick and choose what you wanted to do. You could go to whichever planet you wanted to go to. Everything looked the same. All the planets and space stations looked the same. But so you had to use your imagination. You had to imagine those wireframe spaceships. Would be. Okay. Your imagination had to add some of the detail in a way that modern computer games don't require children to do. But still, they might be engaging with it on more of a cognitive level than you realize. They might be having more of an imaginative experience and more of an enriching experience than you realize, even if they look as though they've turned into zombies. But I don't know. I don't know. It's an unresolvable question. I mean, can you say that video games are bad and reading is good? I don't know.
Yeah, that's debatable, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a good answer, because we don't know fully yet, and I think we just have to see the proof of it. I suppose, will our generation, will this generation be worse than the previous? I don't know, but maybe that's a wrong way to judge it. Even then. But let's get on to the last.
Well, can I just add something into that? What you've just said then about about the next generation compared to this generation. I mean, so ever since technology from the television, from the earliest days of television, in fact, from the earliest days of cinema, people have been predicting a sort of a meltdown in the creativity and the cognition of children. People, when video games came out, of course, people said the video games are bad for children's imagination because they're so passive. But prior to that, it was a television. Everybody has said in previous generations, children who watch too much television, it'll numb their minds and this kind of stuff. And believe it or not, this was said right back through history when books and novels started to become available. I wouldn't be able to confidently pin that down to a decade, but it's probably somewhere in the 1700s, something like that. And believe it or not, there were people who thought that that novels were going to fry our children's minds, and it hasn't happened. Centuries and decades have sailed by, and our children have always blossomed. Each generation after the next after the previous one rather, has blossomed into a generation that is producing more and more fantastic things. So creativity might be under attack, but it's not going down without a fight. It just still seems to survive. It's like the people who said that when we were able to travel at 35 miles per hour on a train, people thought you wouldn't be able to breathe traveling at that speed. Transport's gone way beyond that now, and it's blossoming. I think that the generation that's in school at the moment, whatever education is like for them, whatever video games they've got access to, the generation en masse, not necessarily individuals, but en masse, are going to amaze us with the things that they're able to create in future years.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the thing that might be not beneficial for our next generation, even for ourselves as human beings, no matter what generation you are, is probably there's a big, maybe because I'm entrenched into that world of self-improvement.
Right.
So my message, or the thing that I want to convey and also challenge people on, is self-improvement, to make yourself better today than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's through choices and habits, through nutrition, for example,
Right.
eating better, exercising, moving some more, and using your mind to kind of break out of the self-imposed limits that we've set upon ourselves. So I think that if we don't, we need to encourage and also challenge each other to go to those places, to be uncomfortable, and to push ourselves beyond those limits that we've done. And I think in that way, when we do that, we then tap into, we leave that place of just having to survive. So, for example, if I just have to survive, which is eat and get on and go to work, that's just surviving. Yeah. But if we can tap into that creative energy, which is a bit further up in the energy levels, then I think we're on track to being even more creative than we ever have been. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a case for. I mean, I like the idea of all of that, and bettering ourselves is a great goal, but not everybody has that goal necessarily. There are plenty of ways in which I'm not interested in bettering myself. I want to be a better writer. I want to be a better painter, but I don't care about being a better footballer, for instance. do very little, very little. I do no sport whatsoever, and very, very little exercise, I have to confess. So I'm a terribly bad example in terms of bettering myself in that sense. I eat healthily. I'm I'm a little bit overweight, but not terribly overweight. So I'm probably more lucky than anything else in that sense. But I wonder if there's an argument for it being okay for people to choose to be happy, to stagnate. It sounds like a very pejorative way of wording it, stagnate, but there's that TV series by Ricky Gervais recently called Afterlife. I don't know if you've seen it at all, but it was wonderful.
I've seen it advertised. Yeah.
Okay, and when he was there's just very quickly. Sorry, I've gone off topic wildly here, but the scenario of that is that his wife has died, but a lot of the program is reflecting on the main character's life with his wife, and he says, obviously the main character is Ricky. He says that they didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to do it. They just wanted to come home from work and be with each other because they just had fun. He said, she just made my life. I can't remember what he says exactly, but so I'm not quoting here. But he said he made my life magical, that sort of thing. And you get little snippets, little flashbacks to his life with his wife, who's played by Kerry Godliman, and they're just having such fun. And he's not interested in his career. He's interested in going to work and ticking over and getting out at the end of the day as early as he possibly can, so he can come home and just enjoy being with his wife. And it's hard to argue that anybody should, who's in that situation, should feel obliged to go and improve themselves in some way. I think. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, it's a good challenge.
I think if improvement you find improvement is enriching and is the thing that gives you reward in your life, brilliant. But I'm just wondering if there's an argument for it being okay for people just to be happy with what they've got and just to enjoy ticking over and enjoying it.
I think there is place for that. I don't think everyone needs to have the thought that they need to change the world and leave it a better place than what it was yesterday. And that's the same thing about, improving yourself. But I don't think everyone needs that. I think if you're in that, because that sounds like a place where somebody is happy with what they've got and they don't feel that needs improvement in a way.
Yeah.
And for a majority of people, and I want to get into this last topic, which actually ties in quite nicely, because the message of some of your characters is that they are facing adversity and danger. And so you create these quite dramatic stories. And I was just reading the book about the why adults can't be friends with dragons.
Grown-ups can't be friends with dragons. Yes, yeah.
That one. And so there's the stories of Brian, who he's a young kid, and it sounds like he's lost his mother, and he's just trying to remember her, and kind of the memory's fading, and then he finds a dragon inside of a cave, and so it is quite like heart-wrenching in a way, because you think, shame, this poor kid, he's going through a tough time. His father's working night shifts, he hardly sees him, and he's getting in trouble at school. So it's these stories that really tug at our hearts, because as humans we like drama, right? And also we want to see how somebody has gone through struggles and then overcome through either just pushing into themselves and saying, I can do this. So tell us about your message and why you write in that way in your novels and books.
Okay. I do really like stories that do take you on a bit of an emotional journey, that thrust you into a life that's different from the one you've lived, whether it's during one of the wars or something like that. The one you mentioned, Grown-ups Can't Be Friends with Dragons, is relatively modern day, and there is kind of a specific message behind that one. It's really about the idea of growing up and feeling that you have to turn your back on things you enjoyed as a child. So I'll just illustrate what I mean by that with this little summary of something that happens in the book. In the book, the boy, as you say, he meets a creature. It's not actually a dragon, although he doesn't really get to see what the creature properly looks like until the end, and then there's a bit of a surprise what it looks like. But it is a magical creature. There is an element of fantasy in this quite sort of urban and realistic story. So at the beginning of the story, the boy's very young. I think he's about 6 years old, 7 years old, something like that, at the beginning of the story, and he's met this creature in the cave, which he calls he calls it the dragon. And when he talks to his friends and the adults in his life, they sort of think that's fine. He's got a friend who's the dragon. We expect that from young children using their imagination. The adults pat him on the head kind of thing and don't mind that he's talking about his friend who's a dragon. But as he gets a bit older, he's in secondary school by the end of the story. As he gets a bit older, the adults start to clamp down on him a bit and try and get him to pay more attention to things that they consider to be the sorts of things you need to be doing as you grow up, his schoolwork and so on. And his dad gets very cross with him at one point because he's still talking about this dragon, and this is the sort of thing that upsets his dad, because his dad's a real sort of man's man who doesn't have room in his mind at that particular time anyway for this imaginary world that he thinks that the boy is living in. So the boy goes to the dragon at one point in the book. This isn't the end. It's not a complete spoiler. He goes to the dragon and says, "I can't keep coming to see you anymore because I'm growing up, and grown-ups can't be friends with dragons." And I kind of think that's a really sad kind of pivotal point in the story. And I also think it's very relevant to what happens to most of us. We sort of feel as we grow out of childhood, we kind of feel that we have to leave those childhood imaginings behind. And I always say to kids when I go into schools, we get this message that the world gives us this message that childhood is for playing and adulthood is for working. And I always try to put across the idea that actually adulthood is just as much for playing as everything else. And if you can make your play your work, then great. But when I say the title of the book, Grown-ups Can't Be Friends with Dragons, what I really mean is, the idea that grown-ups can't use their imaginations, grown-ups can't lose themselves in a daydream in the way that you expect children to, because we've got far too many other important things to do. We haven't got time for that sort of thing. And I always try to get across the idea that yes, grown-ups can be friends with dragons, and grown-ups can still be the children that they once were. You've also got to take on responsibilities as an adult as well. I'm not denying the reality of that, but if you can continue to be a child in your imagination, be friends with dragons or unicorns or aliens or whatever it is that fascinates you, then that can enrich your life. And we certainly shouldn't feel that we need to leave those things behind.
Yeah, and this morning we're walking in the village with my kids, and I had this thought as well. That, were you talking about how adults kind of think we can't act like children, or because we might be perceived as being a bit cuckoo?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was just walking along the pavement, and because my kids are young, I also like to make them laugh. And I was just doing some silly things that kids would do. Like I was just imagining that there was this plant that had kind of like overshot the pathway, and I just pretended like I was jumping over it, even though it was a bit too tall for me to do that. And it's a small little example, but it's just something that, if you're prim and proper and you're an adult and you're responsible, you may not do that type of thing. But I think we should be free to have fun and also, in a way, force ourselves to think about or consider having fun, right?
Yeah, playing. I always talk to children in schools about playing, daydreaming, and using your imagination. And I talk about how I used to love to sit on my bedroom floor as a child and play with my toys. I, as an adult, the idea of an adult playing with children's toys sounds a bit strange. People give you funny looks if they were to see me if I took a toy out with me and sat in the doctor's surgery playing with a toy. I might get some funny looks, but I think that's a shame. I think that adulthood is for playing, and play is built into us as a species, isn't it? We do it as and not just humans, but all many animal species have play as part of their psyche, certainly in their younger years. And play helps you to explore ideas. It helps you, as humans, it helps you to explore ideas, complex ideas of good and evil, or it helps you to explore ideas of what might work, what could happen. It helps you to create stories. Terry Pratchett always used to talk about human beings being the storytelling ape. I think that was his. I think it was him who said that. That's what we do. We tell stories, and those stories that we tell can serve all sorts of different purposes. They can be there because actually they're a plan that we're making for something that we're actually going to do in our life. It can be the story of our life that we are building for the next few months or years, with a beginning and a middle and an end that we're hoping to work our way through. Or it might just be that we create a story completely for purposes of fiction, but for other people to enjoy. But whatever we're doing, we are the storytelling ape. We play, and I love the idea that it's okay for adults to carry on playing just like children in the way that you've just described. Some parents would, walking along with their children, and the child does something particularly childish. Some parents, and there might be a time and occasion when it's right to react like this, but some parents might be inclined to snap at the child and tell them to grow up or something like that.
Yeah.
My childhood was wonderful because I had parents who played with me and my brother and a very good friend of mine who was very much immersed in my childhood. We used to have these wild, fantastical games wherever we went, and so that's kind of fed into me and made me realize the value of play, and how important it is to recognize that it's still essential to what we need to do in adult life in order for us to form dreams and then achieve those dreams.
Essential for our well-being as well. So,
yes, very much so.
I'm going to try something here, which I've never done at the end of a session, but I want to share my screen and see if that comes up on the recording. We're going to end off, Anthony. It's been great speaking to you, and for the listeners, and actually for the viewers, because this is I'm just sharing the screen right now. So if you're on the podcast, you won't see this. But I've just brought up Antony Wooten's website, so it's anthonywootten.co.uk, and you can see all of the books that you've published here, Anthony. And tell us about this Eskdale Publishing. Is that just the name you've? This is self-publishing.
Yeah, this is I live on a road called Eskdale Side in a little village in North Yorkshire, and it's such a lovely place that, and it's a great place to be creative in. So I named my publishing company, if you can call it that, after that. Yeah. So on that webpage there, the first batch of books, those first 5 at the top, were the ones that I've self-published. These are the children's books that I've self-published, and I also get commissions from some of the publishing companies, and I've put some of those onto here. I've done a lot of those this year actually that aren't on my website yet, so that's something that I'm really hoping is going to continue to grow and develop for me as well. So that's some of the other books that you can see on that web page. There are the ones that other publishing companies have published, but that they commissioned me to write for them. There's a lot more coming later on that have already been written that will be published soon.
Keeping yourself busy.
Yeah, and those 2 books there, the red one, you can see there's the red one there that's called, well, it's not, that one, and I Wish I'd Asked Why. That's the book of short stories for adults. That's published as a paperback. The one next to it, Gordon Medley's Final Frontier, is absolutely ludicrous. Future, obviously science fiction, space adventure with a Star Trek edge to it. I loved writing it. Like everything I've written, I loved writing it. I know that doesn't mean it's any good. I've not done anything with that one other than I've made it available as a ebook. But the fact that I loved writing it and enjoy it when I do dip back into it and check it through and so on, I know that doesn't mean it's
no.
going
If
to
you enjoy
appeal
it,
to
someone else
anybody
can
else.
enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Good
And the
stuff.
2 at the bottom there, I have a writers group here where I live, and we get together and share what we've written and help each other to improve as writers. And we've published those 2 books at the bottom, Time Well Spent and Wild and Penned. Those are books that we've put together, anthologies of our short stories. So lots of exciting things have happened for me over the last, this has all happened since 2011, and it's been a really great few years.
Brilliant stuff, Anthony. It's been great talking to you. And
you
for our listeners, they can catch you either at Antony Wootten antonywootten.co.uk, or just get you on Instagram or Twitter. I think you got a certain handle. Is it just, what is it again, Anthony?
Right. So I make very little use of social media, but I can be reached on Twitter. I can't even remember what my Twitter handle is. I think it's at Antony Wootten. Just a quick word about my spelling. If people can't see what's on the screen there, I just want to point out how to spell my name if people do want to find me. It's Antony with no H, Antony, and Wootten is WOOTTEN. So if you just type in Antony Wootten and spell it that way, then my website does come up, and my Facebook and Twitter accounts are on there. It'd be lovely to get some more followers, and I might start actually trying to do something with the with social media.
There you go.
I really should.
It's been great having you on the show, all the way from in Yorkshire. And thanks for being on the LifeShot today.
I've loved it. Thanks very much. Great talking to you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.